When we talk about fat loss, we need to separate weight loss from fat loss. They are not the same. Most people approach fat loss as a simple game of eat less, move more. And while there's a basic thermodynamic truth to that, the real challenge is this. How do you encourage your body to use stored fat for energy without breaking down the very muscle you've worked hard to build or maintain? The first and arguably most important lever to pull is a properly calibrated caloric deficit. Yes, you need to consume fewer calories than your body burns in a day to lose fat. But if you drop calories too aggressively, especially without adjusting your macronutrient intake, you signal the body to conserve energy, and worse, to catabolize muscle tissue. Muscle is metabolically expensive, and in times of perceived starvation, your body sees it as expendable. That's a biological survival mechanism. We're wired for survival, not aesthetics. This is where dietary protein becomes essential, not optional, essential. Numerous peer-reviewed studies show that when individuals are in a caloric deficit but consume sufficient protein, generally in the range of 1.6 to 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, they retain significantly more lean mass compared to those consuming lower amounts of protein. Why? Because protein does two critical things. First, it provides the amino acids necessary for muscle protein synthesis. Second, it triggers a satiety response that helps regulate hunger, making it easier to adhere to a caloric deficit without experiencing extreme cravings or dips in energy. But it's not just about hitting a number at the end of the day. The distribution of protein matters. Emerging research suggests that evenly spaced protein feedings, around 3 to 4 meals per day with at least 25 to 40 grams of high-quality protein each, produce a more favorable anabolic environment than a single large bolus. That's because muscle tissue responds acutely to feeding windows. It doesn't store amino acids the way fat stores energy, so regular signaling through dietary protein is what keeps muscle protein synthesis elevated throughout the day. Now let's talk about the type of protein. High-quality protein sources such as eggs, fish, poultry, lean meats, and dairy contain all the essential amino acids, particularly leucine, which is a key activator of the mTOR pathway. mTOR is the molecular switch that turns on muscle building. If you don't hit that leucine threshold in a meal, even if you eat a large quantity of lower quality protein, you miss out on that muscle preserving signal. In practical terms, that means starting your day with a protein dominant meal. For someone trying to lose fat without losing muscle, breakfast isn't just fuel, it's an opportunity to signal the body to hold on to muscle. This could be as simple as a couple of eggs with Greek yogurt or a protein shake with added fiber and healthy fats to blunt glucose spikes. The goal is to feed the muscle, not the fat stores. Timing around training also matters. Consuming protein in close proximity to resistance training, either before or after, can enhance the muscle preserving effects, especially during caloric restriction. There's a synergistic effect between mechanical load and amino acid availability. You're essentially telling the body, we're still using this tissue, don't break it down. And while we're in this phase of cutting fat, it's tempting to ramp up cardio and reduce calories even more. That approach often backfires. If protein intake isn't maintained during this phase, what you'll often see is not just fat loss, but strength loss, performance loss, and metabolic slowdown. The metabolic rate declines not just because of less body mass, but because of muscle loss. And muscle is the single most important driver of resting energy expenditure. The more you preserve, the more fat you burn passively. So the takeaway here is not to avoid a calorie deficit. You need that, but it has to be intelligently managed. And protein is the foundational nutrient that allows you to do that while minimizing lean tissue loss. You're not just feeding a body in a deficit, you're directing it. Every meal is an opportunity to communicate with your physiology. Every meal is a signal. If you want to lose fat without losing muscle, your first priority is not just to eat less, but to eat smart. Caloric restriction without nutritional strategy is just a guessing game, and the cost is usually muscle. And once muscle is gone, it's very hard to get it back. Most people make the mistake of thinking that fat loss is only about nutrition and cardio. They focus entirely on the scale, hoping the number drops fast. And sure, with aggressive caloric restriction and enough aerobic output, the number will drop. But what's actually being lost? Is it body fat? Is it water? Or is it muscle tissue? The very structure that gives your body strength, posture, metabolic efficiency, and definition. The answer depends heavily on one variable, whether or not you are resistance training. Muscle is not something the body holds on to automatically during a deficit. In fact, without the proper signal, it becomes one of the first things your body sacrifices. Muscle is expensive to maintain. It burns energy at rest. So when you're in a hypocaloric state, especially without the presence of strength training, your body starts to down-regulate that expense. It lets go of what it perceives as unnecessary. This is where resistance training becomes absolutely essential, not as a secondary component, but as a central pillar of fat loss with muscle preservation. It's not just about lifting weights to build more muscle. During a fat loss phase, the goal of resistance training is to provide a mechanical signal that says this tissue is still needed, and the body listens. It's remarkably adaptive, but it needs reasons to hold on to tissue that isn't helping immediate survival in a low energy state. Resistance training accomplishes two critical things during a cut. First, it preserves lean mass by activating pathways like mTOR and other anabolic signaling cascades, particularly when combined with adequate protein. Second, it helps maintain neural adaptations and strength output, things that decline rapidly if not stimulated. The mistake many people make is reducing intensity or volume in the gym when they start dieting. The mindset becomes, I'm eating less, so I should train less hard. That's backwards. While total volume may need to be adjusted slightly to account for reduced recovery capacity, intensity, specifically mechanical tension, should be maintained. Heavy compound lifts, controlled eccentrics, and full range of motion training are your allies here. It's not about chasing the pump or sweating through endless sets. It's about sending a clear and consistent signal to the neuromuscular system that says, stay strong, stay useful. And that signal must be repeated multiple times per week. A training frequency of 3 to 5 sessions with emphasis on major movement patterns, push, pull, hinge, squat, carry, will go a long way toward preserving muscle during caloric restriction. There's another critical piece that often gets overlooked: energy partitioning. When you resistance train during a fat loss phase, your body becomes more efficient at directing nutrients toward muscle repair and less likely to store them as fat. That means the food you do eat, especially carbohydrates around training, gets used to rebuild tissue and restore glycogen instead of being stored in adipose tissue. You're essentially telling your body how to use the fuel you give it. This is why lifting weights doesn't just help preserve muscle, it also accelerates fat loss, especially over time. Muscle tissue is metabolically active. The more of it you retain, the higher your resting metabolic rate. That means even when you're not training, you burn more calories at rest. This is why two people with the same weight and the same calorie intake can have very different physiques. It's not just about the scale. It's about composition. And muscle changes everything about that equation. Now, people often ask whether cardio should be eliminated or reduced when resistance training is the focus during fat loss. The answer isn't binary. Cardio can be helpful, especially for cardiovascular health and additional energy expenditure, but it should never replace resistance training. If time or recovery capacity is limited, prioritize the weights. Use cardio as a tool low intensity steady state for recovery, or high intensity intervals in short bursts for metabolic conditioning. But don't lean on it as the foundation. Fat loss is not just about stripping weight off the body. It's about reshaping it. And you cannot reshape the body through nutrition alone. You need mechanical tension. You need resistance. You need stress on the musculature to retain the shape, the strength, and the function of your body. Without that, the weight comes off, but the structure underneath it disappears. So while diet creates the deficit and protein provides the substrate for preservation, it's resistance training that sends the signal. It's the language your muscles understand. And during fat loss, it's the difference between ending up lean and strong or simply smaller and weaker. If you want to preserve what you've built while getting lean, resistance training is not optional. It's non-negotiable, delivered in the tone and cadence of Dr. Andrew Huberman's lecture style. Clear, scientific, and engaging with a focused and impactful conclusion. When we talk about fat loss and muscle preservation, it's easy to focus on training and nutrition, macros, reps, sets, timing, all of that. But there's a third variable that often goes ignored, and it might be the most powerful one when it comes to shifting your body composition in a sustainable way. That variable is sleep. Now, this isn't just about feeling rested. It's about understanding how sleep acts as a regulatory switch for nearly every system involved in fat metabolism, muscle recovery, and hormonal balance. Sleep isn't passive recovery, it's active recalibration. And when it's compromised, everything from your energy levels to your metabolic rate and even your decision making around food starts to degrade. Let's break it down. When you enter deep stages of sleep, specifically stages 3 and 4 of non-REM sleep, your body releases pulses of growth hormone. These are some of the most anabolic periods of the entire 24-hour cycle. Growth hormone plays a critical role in tissue repair, fat oxidation, and preserving lean mass. And what's interesting is that the majority of this growth hormone release happens in the first half of the night, provided you're getting into deep, high-quality sleep. Miss that window and you're missing out on the natural hormonal surge that supports fat loss and muscle recovery. But it doesn't stop there. Poor sleep, whether it's short duration or poor quality, immediately disrupts key hormones related to body composition. For example, leptin, the hormone that signals satiety, drops. Ghrelin, the hormone that triggers hunger, increases. And cortisol, the stress hormone that promotes fat storage and muscle breakdown, rises significantly. 1 or 2 nights of poor sleep and you start craving high carbohydrate, high fat foods, not because of willpower issues, but because of physiological shifts in the brain's reward systems and hunger signaling. So here's the paradox. You could be in a calorie deficit, you could be training consistently and hitting your protein targets, but if your sleep is chronically disrupted, whether from late night screen use, stress, irregular bedtimes, or alcohol, you'll see less fat loss, more muscle loss, and reduced performance in the gym. You're essentially putting the brakes on your own progress, even while doing the right things during the day. And this becomes especially critical during a cutting phase. When you're in a caloric deficit, your body is already in a stressed state. Sleep is when the system recovers and adapts. If you're not sleeping, you're not recovering. And if you're not recovering, the signals you're sending through training and nutrition can't be fully processed. One study that illustrates this clearly took 2 groups of people in a calorie deficit. One group slept about 8 hours a night. The other group slept around 5.5 hours. Both groups lost weight, but the composition of that weight loss was drastically different. The 8-hour group lost primarily fat. The 5.5-hour group lost a significant portion of lean muscle tissue. Same diet, same deficit, completely different outcomes. Why? Because the sleep-deprived group wasn't producing enough anabolic hormones and wasn't recovering enough to preserve muscle mass. This is why sleep is not just recovery, it's regulation. If your goal is to lose fat while preserving muscle, sleep becomes a strategic priority, not an afterthought. From a practical standpoint, this means aiming for 7 to 9 hours of quality sleep per night, ideally with a consistent bedtime and wake time, even on weekends. Avoiding stimulants late in the day, dimming lights in the evening to signal melatonin production, limiting screen exposure 60 to 90 minutes before bed. All of these are levers that directly impact sleep quality. Temperature also plays a role. A cooler sleeping environment around 65 to 68 degrees Fahrenheit can help facilitate deeper stages of sleep. Likewise, light exposure early in the day helps regulate circadian rhythms, making it easier to fall asleep at night and maintain hormonal balance over the 24-hour cycle. All of this becomes part of the plan, not separate from training and nutrition, but integrated with it. Because ultimately, sleep is where the changes you're working for actually happen. You don't grow in the gym. You don't get lean in the kitchen alone. You adapt while you sleep. If you're doing everything right during the day, dialing in your nutrition, lifting with intensity, staying in a sustainable deficit, but you're staying up until 2 a.m. scrolling your phone or sacrificing sleep for more output, you're leaving massive progress on the table. You're working against your own biology. So when you're in a fat loss phase and your goal is to preserve lean mass, don't just focus on what you eat or how you train. Focus on how you recover, because the fastest way to ruin a well-structured plan is to neglect the hours when the body does the real work. If you want to lose fat without losing muscle, you don't just need to work harder. You need to sleep smarter. If you've dialed in your protein intake, your resistance training with consistency, and your sleep is optimized, you've built a powerful foundation for fat loss while preserving muscle. But there's another lever that can sharpen those results even further, something that doesn't get as much attention as it should. And that's nutrient timing and macronutrient partitioning. In other words, not just what you eat, but when you eat it and how your body allocates those nutrients depending on the context you create around them. Now, to be clear, calories still matter. Total daily energy balance is the anchor. But once that's in place, when you eat specific macronutrients, especially carbohydrates and protein, can have a significant impact on performance, recovery, and body composition outcomes. Your body's sensitivity to insulin, your ability to absorb amino acids into muscle tissue, and even your psychological relationship with food all fluctuate across the day. Aligning your nutrient intake with those biological rhythms makes everything more efficient. Let's take protein first. As we've discussed, consistent protein intake spread across the day creates a muscle-preserving signal, particularly during a deficit. But there's an even more powerful effect when you consume protein in close proximity to resistance training. This window, roughly 1 to 2 hours before and after a training session, is when your muscles are most receptive to nutrient uptake. Insulin sensitivity is elevated, blood flow to muscle is increased, and amino acid transporters are more active. If you place a high-quality protein source in that window, whether from whole food or a well-formulated supplement, you increase the rate of muscle protein synthesis and reduce breakdown. Carbohydrates also play a key role here. Despite what some extreme diet philosophies suggest, carbohydrates are not the enemy. When used strategically, they enhance performance in the gym, improve recovery, and help regulate cortisol levels. In fact, consuming carbohydrates around training, especially post-workout, can help blunt the cortisol response and shift the body from a catabolic to an anabolic state. That means less muscle breakdown, more recovery, and better energy regulation across the day. Think about what's happening hormonally during intense resistance training. Cortisol rises. That's a natural and necessary response. It mobilizes energy, drives alertness, and prepares the body to meet a physical demand. but you don't want cortisol elevated for hours post-workout. If you finish training and delay eating, especially carbohydrates, that elevated cortisol can persist, leading to increased muscle protein breakdown and impaired recovery. The solution is simple. Fuel the system. A post-training meal with protein and moderate carbohydrate intake helps shut that stress signal down and shifts the body into rebuild mode. This is also where macronutrient partitioning comes into play. Your body is better at directing nutrients into muscle tissue when insulin sensitivity is high after resistance training, in the morning, and generally earlier in the day. So if you're operating in a calorie deficit and want to make sure the food you do eat is going to the right place, aligning carbohydrate intake with periods of high activity is one of the most effective strategies. Save your high carb meals for the hours surrounding your workout. Keep the rest of the day centered around protein, healthy fats, and fiber-dense vegetables to regulate blood sugar and support satiety. There's also a behavioral component here that shouldn't be ignored. When you organize your meals around your training and biological rhythms, you're less likely to snack impulsively or chase quick energy through processed foods. You're not fighting hunger with willpower, you're managing it with structure. That makes adherence easier, and adherence is everything. Even meal frequency plays a role. For some people, 3 larger meals per day works best. For others, 4 smaller meals with protein evenly distributed helps manage appetite and maintain muscle protein synthesis throughout the day. The key is not to follow arbitrary meal patterns, but to understand your personal energy demands, schedule, and recovery capacity. The body responds to consistency. You don't have to eat every 2 hours, but you do need to be deliberate with when and how you fuel, especially in a fat loss phase. We also know that circadian biology influences how your body metabolizes food. Eating large meals late at night, especially high carb or high fat meals, often leads to impaired glucose tolerance and disrupted sleep. This doesn't mean you can't eat after dark. It means that your body is less efficient at handling those nutrients late in the day. Front-legging your calories, especially around your workout, and tapering as you approach bedtime can lead to better blood sugar control, improved sleep quality, and more effective fat utilization overnight. None of these strategies are extreme. They're grounded in physiology and supported by decades of research. The beauty is in the subtlety. When you align your nutrient timing with your training, sleep, and daily rhythm, you're not just feeding the body, you're programming it. You're creating an environment where fat loss can occur without compromising the systems that build and preserve muscle. And when your internal environment is aligned with your external efforts, progress becomes inevitable.